He was born in New York City, lived in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and Greeley, Colorado. Life's twists and turns eventually landed him in Puyallup, Washington. And on November 17th, he found himself standing on a stage at Meeker Elementary School for a Veterans Day assembly, about to speak. He was there as a replacement for the person who'd been scheduled to talk. She was born in Greenville, South Carolina, lived in St. Joseph's, Missouri, and Spokane, Washington. Life's twists and turns eventually landed her in Puyallup, Washington. And on November 17th, she found herself in the audience at Meeker Elementary School for a Veterans Day assembly, about to listen to a speaker. She'd been called in as a substitute teacher for the woman who normally teaches. The odds of the two of them being together in that city, in that room, on that day, boggle the mind. James Clinton served in the Air Force, first the Korean War, then the Vietnam War. And something happened in 1964 that helped shape his life. And on this day, at Meeker Elementary, he decided to talk about it to the children gathered before him.
And just let flow whatever came up. And I had to mention the close call, so I did. And that was the close call in my life in the Air Force. So I mentioned Bermuda and the switch.
The switch, a decision made a lifetime ago that completely altered the arcs of two entire families. He was stationed in Bermuda, Kindley Air Force Base. He had a buddy named Martin Nisker. That's Martin entertaining James's children at a birthday party at his home.
And at times we had him over to our house because he was there by himself, separated from his family.
Martin Nisker's family was finally moving to Bermuda in mid-June, and he wanted to show them around the island the day they arrived. But on that same day, he was scheduled to be navigator on a flight to Atlanta. So he asked his friend James Clinton for a swap, and James agreed.
I would take the flight that was going to Atlanta, and he would take the flight that was on this special drill.
So Martin Nisker showed his young family around Bermuda and moved them into their new home, and they were happy. In return, a couple of weeks later, on June 29th, he took the training mission off the coast of Bermuda that James Clinton was supposed to be on. They took off at 11:05.
In two such Air Force planes, medical teams set off over the Atlantic to practice parachute rescue in preparation for the two-man Gemini space program. But 2 miles off the southern coast of Bermuda, the transport's wingtips touch. The planes burst into flames and plunge into the sea. Of the 24 people aboard, 7 are rescued, 17 are killed. And within 24 hours...
One of the men killed that day was Martin Nisker.
I'm familiar with death, and I'm not terribly impressed with it.
53 years later, on that day at Meeker Elementary School, as James told the story about the crash, Kim Zeiger, the substitute teacher called into work that day, listened on. And when he had finished, Kim's heart pounded, and she waited in the gymnasium to speak to James.
The first thing I said to him when I went up was, "Hello, Mr. Clinton. Nice job on your speech. Was the date of that collision where you changed jobs, was that June 29th, 1964? And he looked at me like, yeah. Like, how'd you know it? Because he didn't say it in his report. And I said, who was the man that you took his spot? And then he said, Martin Nisker. That's my dad.
And then she said, that was my father.
Fleeting images stolen from the loosely guarded vault of time and faded memory. A little girl in an open field with her mother, a father and a grandmother and a little boy, and the old field is a cemetery. And for a moment in time, anything is possible for a young family launching itself into the world. Kim Zeiger was a daddy's girl.
you know, could hardly wait till he got home. And then he'd come in with his duffel bag, and then he'd empty the bag, and he'd put us in his duffel bag and swing us back and forth. You know, I mean, this is midnight, and my mom would say, "Time to go to bed, kids." But we just loved getting to see my dad.
Kim was 8 years old when the family joined Martin in Bermuda. She was there when her dad showed the family around. They'd only been there a couple of weeks when the crash happened.
And my mom said, "Something's happened," and she turned on the radio. And she didn't usually turn on the radio, but she turned it on to hear the news. And she started crying. And she heard about the collision. And I said, "No, that's not Dad. That can't be Dad's plane." She said, "I think it is." And then pretty soon, a car drove up in front of the house, and a man and a lady in their uniforms got out, started walking up the sidewalk, and I don't think my mom wanted him to come in the house, but you know, they said that my dad had been killed.
After that, the family moved away from Bermuda to begin life without their father, their husband, their champion.
It was a nightmare. It was just an awful nightmare. And then,
Kim had substituted at Meeker Elementary for 20 years. She'd passed a woman named Shirley in the hallways hundreds of times, never knowing that Shirley was married to a man named James Clinton. And that day, after the assembly, they stood there for a time, astounded.
And I was shocked. I couldn't speak. I experienced guilt. I said, "Yeah, I'm here because your father traded places with me." What could I say?
Kim's family hadn't known there was a switch, that there was another man who was alive because Martin Nisker died.
well, it's mixed feelings. It brings up all my feelings about my dad still. You know, I have such a deep love for him, and I miss him. But yet, there's joy in knowing that James and his wife have led such a wonderful life.
That they would be in that room on that day at that moment, 53 years later, is almost impossible to fathom. They get together on occasion now. There are children and grandchildren, and Virginia, Kim's mom and Martin's wife, shows up. She's 95 now. Together, they marvel at the cruelty of fate and the healing power of time.
It is an honor to toast the memory of Major Martin Nisker, loving husband and father, gentleman, and career Air Force navigator. Here's to Marty.
And all of them are now changed forever by the miracle at Meeker.